Welcome back, Focus Learners. Okay, today we are diving headfirst into the incredibly high-stakes, heavily capitalized world of global construction and engineering. We're going to explore how international sustainability standards, specifically the Engineering and Construction Services Standard, are actually forcing companies to pull back the curtain and show us exactly how they do business. So get ready, because in this explainer, we are going to break down precisely how we track and measure the true cost of ethical breaches in mega projects.
I want to start us off with a pretty massive question. How do you put a price tag on a rigged megaproject? No, really, think about it. When we walk through a major city, we see the finished product, right? The massive bridges, the towering skyscrapers, the sprawling transit systems, but that's just the visible layer. Beneath all that concrete and steel lies a super complex, almost entirely unseen web of financial accountability and project bidding. And when that web gets tangled up in unethical practices, well, the financial fallout can be absolutely staggering. The problem is, for a really long time, measuring that fallout, actually quantifying the cost of corruption in any sort of standardized way, was incredibly difficult. To really understand why we need a specific metric for this, you kind of have to look at the whole industry like a giant iceberg. We only ever see the top 10%, but we desperately need to know what's lurking underneath. So why is the engineering and construction industry so uniquely vulnerable to ethical breaches? Well, the source material lays out a few key factors. First off, these are massively global operations. You've got companies managing hundreds of local agents and subcontractors across completely different legal jurisdictions. Add to that the sheer mind-boggling complexity of project financing and permitting, where billions of dollars are just constantly moving through various channels. Then you throw in the massive magnitude of these infrastructure contracts and combine it with a high-pressure, intensely fierce competitive bidding process. I mean, it basically creates a pressure cooker environment where the temptation to just cut an ethical corner can be incredibly high. Okay, let's dive into this. To bring some actual order to this chaotic landscape, we have the SASB standards, which provide very specific disclosure topics. We're going to zoom in specifically on business ethics. And here's the real game changer. This isn't just about a company putting out a nice press release saying, hey, we promise to be good. Not at all. It's about providing investors with hard, quantifiable data on where a company might be failing ethically and exactly how much that failure is costing them in dollars and cents. It literally transforms business ethics from this vague PR talking point into a hard, undeniable financial metric. Now, the standard clearly divides these ethical breaches into two main buckets that companies have to track. On one side, you have bribery and corruption. This is essentially defined as the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. So think of things like making illicit, under-the-table payments to government officials just to secure or hold on to a massive building contract. On the other side, we have anti-competitive practices. These are all the sneaky tactics used to manipulate the market and limit fair competition, things like price fixing, fraud, or antitrust behavior. Let's actually look a bit closer at a couple of these specific anti-competitive underworld tactics that the standard highlights. First up is bid pooling. To completely de-jargonize this, just think of it like a rigged game of poker. Imagine sitting down at a table, but all your opponents have already secretly agreed in advance who's going to take the pot and exactly how they're going to split the winnings later. There's no way you can win. In the construction world, bid pooling happens when competing contractors secretly coordinate behind closed doors to split upcoming contracts. They basically guarantee that each bidder is awarded a specific, pre-agreed amount of work. It completely, utterly destroys the entire concept of a free market bidding process.
And then we have complementary bidding, which you might also hear called cover bidding or courtesy bidding. This is exactly how these cartels create the illusion of competition. Here's how it works. A contractor will submit a bid for a huge project, but they will intentionally make that bid artificially high, or they'll throw in completely unacceptable terms. They have absolutely zero intention of actually winning the contract. So why even do it? To make the pre-selected winner's bid look totally reasonable and competitive by comparison. It perfectly guarantees a pre-selected winner while completely fooling the project owner into thinking a fair, hard-fought contest just took place.
So, the crucial point is, how in the world do we track the fallout when these companies actually get caught playing these games? Enter metric IF-IN 510A.2. This specific metric requires entities to disclose the total amount of monetary losses incurred as a direct result of legal proceedings associated with those charges of bribery, corruption, and anti-competitive practices we just talked about. This is it. This is the exact metric companies are forced to use to confess their ethical sins right on their balance sheets. It's basically the ultimate follow the money requirement. Let's break down exactly what that money looks like. The metric casts a really wide net over all kinds of legal proceedings. We're talking civil actions like massive settlements, regulatory proceedings that result in penalties or disgorgement, and of course, criminal actions, including criminal judgments and restitution. But there is one absolutely crucial exclusion you need to note here: legal defense fees. By explicitly omitting the fees the company spent on its own lawyers to defend itself, the standard ensures that the metric only reflects the pure, punitive loss. It gives investors a completely unclouded view of the actual penalty paid for the ethical breach, rather than muddying the waters by blending it with the cost of high-priced defense attorneys.
Now, let's pivot and look at the human element of all this data, because honestly, a massive financial loss just dropped onto a spreadsheet doesn't really tell us how a company is actually changing its behavior. According to the notes for this standard, companies can't just report a giant fine and walk away. They are required to tell the full story behind the penalty. They have to describe the nature of the loss, like, was this a quiet settlement, a deferred prosecution agreement, or an outright guilty plea? They have to describe the context. For example, was this a major violation of conflicts of interest? And crucially, they must detail any corrective actions they've taken in response to getting caught.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the standard forces a company to systematically prove they are fixing the actual root causes of the corruption. It's way more than just a slap on the wrist. When detailing those corrective actions, the source material notes that companies might need to make sweeping, fundamental changes in their daily operations and even top-level management. They might have to completely overhaul their internal processes and technology just for tracking bids. They may be forced to reevaluate all their external business partners and subcontractors. And finally, they have to implement new, rigorous employee training programs to ensure the core culture of the company actually shifts.
I think this quote from the standard perfectly summarizes the core philosophy at play here. By demanding a description of the nature, the context, and the corrective actions, the standard is sending a very clear, very loud message. True financial transparency isn't just about writing a giant check to pay a fine. It's about deep, provable institutional reform. It's about proving to the market that the bad behavior hasn't just been penalized, but that the structural vulnerabilities that allowed it to happen in the very first place have been permanently closed. So, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. We've talked a lot about financial metrics, standard disclosures, and legal proceedings today. But the real-world impact of all this goes so far beyond a corporate balance sheet. If standardized corporate accountability actually forces every hidden bribe and rigged bid out into the light, if companies can literally no longer hide the true staggering costs of their ethical breaches, how might this level of transparency fundamentally reshape the cities we actually live in? Because better, fairer competition means better materials, safer structures, and a way more efficient use of our public funds. It's a pretty fascinating ripple effect when you think about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, Focus Learners. Keep asking the right questions, and I will see you next time.